Santa Clara Design Boutique provides accessible and affordable ways to create beautiful, sacred spaces in your everyday. Creating spaces that reflect what is true and good and beautiful is near and dear to owner and lead designer Lauren Gouldy's heart. Visit Santa Clara Design online at santaclaradesign.com to find a wide variety of Catholic art, prints, canvases, stickers, printables, tees, mugs, totes, and more. Sinner Saint Sister listeners get 10% off of their print and sticker orders with code Sinner Saint Sister. Sometimes on a really hectic day, I'll head over to @SantaClaraDesign on Instagram to scroll and just take in all of the piece. Head over there on Instagram and Facebook @SantaClaraDesign to join their email list. Welcome to Sinner Saint Sister. I am your host, Allison Sullivan, and this is a podcast that highlights the ways that people have leaned into life, their heartaches, their stories, their lessons. Some of my very favorite feedback that I get about Sinner Saint Sister is when people tell me that listening is the most peaceful part of their week. You can head over now to youtube.com/Allison Sullivan to watch us there too. I hope you hear something today that lets you know you are loved and helps you love one another. Welcome to Sinner Saint Sister. The summer that my third baby came, I fell apart a little bit. I call that summer Summergeddon, because having 3 kids right in a row was not for the faint of heart. Now, before my third came, I felt like I had just been dabbling in parenthood, and it feels really important to say right here that there was nothing about having 1 kid or having 2 that felt easy. Absolutely nothing. But 3, it felt Olympian. It was no joke. I felt like I couldn't do anything without 10 out of 10 scale full exertion. Just getting them into the car felt athletic, and I've never described myself as an athlete. I would get everyone fed and dressed with snacks in their hands and into the car for a doctor's appointment and feel like a complete and total Olympian. I would celebrate the rest of the day with tequila shots and balloons. Fine. No balloons, but I deserved balloons. And do you want to know why? Because I live in Texas and it's hot. It would be 102 degrees outside, yes, in the morning, and I think that index thing like triples it or something. I used to celebrate graduations and weddings and promotions, birthdays, the like. Now I was just getting some kids in a car. I didn't break suddenly. It was a little more gentle than that, if you can describe a break as gentle. I remember one morning laying in my bed, covered in breast milk and sweat, and I was watching my husband get ready for work. He was clean as a whistle, fresh out of the shower, and he was getting dressed, tightening his belt around his very trim waist. And he was going to go walk into a building where everyone respected his opinion and probably never experimented with the new word that they had just learned, no, and how emphatically they could say it without being disciplined. I laid there and hot tears stung my eyes. I was missing something, although I didn't know what because I had zero desire to get in pants with a belt. Or take a shower, for that matter. Maybe it was the prestige. Maybe it was the exit sign. Maybe I missed that my husband could walk out of an exit sign and completely wipe his hands of that day. I had neglected myself and my own needs for so long in the midst of mothering. Sleepless nights, boredom, repetitive tasks that I didn't feel challenged my potential to think or to create. My body being everyone's except my own. That as I watched my husband get ready for work that morning, I realized that somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. And it's complicated, isn't it? Because there's nothing that I had ever loved more. My love for my kids was fierce. It was so fierce, it was startling. The tenderness that I kept around my motherhood and the nagging fear that maybe I wasn't doing enough or maybe I wasn't doing it right. This child that I'd been given, I'd never cared about anything else more than this thing called motherhood, this thing that could make my heart soar and crash and then soar again. Why the tears laying in bed that morning? And then, even more complicated still, couple all of that passion with the Christian message that I had received that my faithfulness first required a kind of death, a death to self. In that moment, in my wet pajamas, watching my clean and driven husband, I had this moment of clarity. First, it was sadness, but then it was clarity. I had absorbed a message that said that anything I did for myself was going to take something away from my kids. That if I did something that restored me, it might ruin them. And how do I say this gently? Because once that thought was brought to light, there's a disinfecting quality to the light, I realized it was crap. Because as Christians know, death, it leads to life. It's not being swallowed whole by life. I am not called to give everything away without ever figuring out what to do with all this fire in my belly. I am called to serving these little people, certainly, who will live and sin and bless and give and seek independence and undoubtedly break my heart a million times over just to put it back together stronger, livelier, holier than before. But it doesn't define me. Only one thing defines me. And so the real question isn't, am I faithfully obeying God or not? The question is, how am I faithfully obeying God? How has God called me to be my most beautifully feminine self? What is my way? What's the way God has given me to celebrate my womanhood, my motherhood? Death might certainly look different from person to person, but in every case, no matter how we are called, it will be a gospel act. Life. And we're all such beautiful women, uniquely gifted, divinely inspired, the crown of creation, frankly, his finest work, let's be honest. And we have different triumphs and traumas, different callings and missions, and what degrades you might empower another. And what empowers you might degrade another, because how could there possibly just be one way to be something as beautifully complicated as woman? There's not. So I lay in my bed crying, and I made a decision right then and there that my writing was going to be my calm, quiet space to think and to dream, to ask myself, am I faithfully obeying God? Watching my husband that morning, it was this eye opener that something just had to give. I needed something for me, and my husband was so beautifully supportive, and he arranged his schedule to allow me space. I was skeptical that such a thing truly existed while raising babies. Space. I mean, I bathed with farm animals and dinosaurs floating around me. But God is mighty. After all, he spoke light into place. Surely he could make the days a little longer, my house a little quieter, my load a little lighter, so that every once in a while, with some regularity, I might be able to set aside some time to read and to write about him. With my husband's help, he bought me a new computer that Christmas. That's how it happened. That's how I became to depend on writing as a way of life for me. It calms a restlessness that I've never been able to put my finger squarely on. I steal moments to do it. I stay up late to try to do it well. And when I daydream of a perfect day, it always includes creating something written. I write because I feel like I'm supposed to, and I'm not sure that we can choose for ourselves that which we are supposed to do. I just feel led to it by God. Even at very inconvenient times, I feel led to it. When I'd rather sleep or watch TV or finish a book, I have crawled out of bed in the middle of the night just to jot down some ideas, because I found that it's then that I am the least judgmental of the timid little words that crawl out. With a baby in my arms and a toddler on my lap and cups of juice dangerously close, I've henpecked one-handed words that seem to want to be written. I have paused in the middle of labor, baby-producing labor, in order to tell a story that I think needs told. And what if embracing what we feel led to taught us something about some of our greatest loves? Because I have discovered that creating, it makes me a better mom. I'm creating my own identity. And here's the thing, my kids are watching me do it. They're watching. So when I lock my keys in my car and when I say my favorite 4-letter word, my kids are watching. They're watching when the right song comes on at the right time and can make me bawl. They're there as I read my Bible or sit needy in church or honk my horn in a rage at the guy who had the nerve to cut me off in traffic. They're there when I take the emergency phone call and help a dear friend. They're there when I ignore them for longer than I should, if I'm on social media or trying to send an email. There are very few aspects of my life that my kids aren't a witness to. And for a long time, my work, my creativity, my love, it was one of those aspects. They never saw what I was passionate about besides them. But lately, I've been able to include them by bringing them to some speaking events. And there's nothing like those two worlds colliding, the fiery love that I have for them both. And when I think about my babies and what they observe from me, I know that they're not just observing, because they're creating their own lives too. And if this isn't enough to keep working to get it right, then nothing will be. I cannot remember how I connected with Shannon Evans, But once I did, I clung to her words, a little desperately even. Her convictions and the beautiful poetic way that she explained them made me feel like I had found a beacon in the darkness. She's challenging. She doesn't let anything slide past her. She points her finger at injustice, all the while creating a more likable world, and her messages are honest and bare and crushing and beautiful. Moms, I know you know. My children are all at once my greatest joy and my greatest stressor. And Shannon speaks to this duality in a way that makes me feel seen and loved and encouraged, and I know that you'll feel it too. Have you heard of Pink Salt Riot products? Jewelry, greeting cards, lifestyle goods, gifts anyone who loves Jesus would love. All of it exists to remind women of what God says about them, that they are beloved and that they are worthy exactly as they are. Everything they make points us back to that truth. You can follow them at Pink Salt Riot on TikTok and on Instagram. I know that it's important to me to shed a veneer of performance and to show up authentically as possible and to live into the mission that God has for me, and Pink Salt Riot certainly helps me do that. You'll love it. Shannon! I am so excited that you're here on Center Saint Sister. I just absolutely love following you. I love following you because I feel like, and I feel like this is hard to do, I feel like you have found this perfect balance of pushing people outside of comfort, but then allowing them to feel really accompanied as you do it. And so with you, nobody journeys alone. And so I feel like as someone who, who has a platform like you do, you can either be this really accommodating leader who says the things that that people want to hear, or you can be a challenging prophet. And the temptation to be first or neither of those things is probably pretty great, because there's a fair amount of loneliness that goes around preaching new ideas in different ways. So you say challenging things, and maybe it doesn't always gain you a lot of affection. And there's something about the way that you do it that, I don't know, it just feels really, as I've been following you, we've been really enjoying this word expansive lately. But there's this really expansive way that you do it. You just press on, and you do it in a way that bears beauty to the Jesus way of doing things, that's more than just this Christianized version of our own experiences, but it actually transforms. So I just, the whole point, Shannon, is that I just love your style. I'm so grateful that you're here. You're a beautiful writer, and you write about things that might not have a lot of conventional beauty, but neither does the cross. And so if you have eyes to see something in a new way, then there's a transcendent beauty. And in so many ways over the last couple of years, you have helped me have eyes to see. And you certainly did this with your most recent undertaking, Rewilding Motherhood. So before we get started and dive into this, because I'm dying, I would love for you to give a brief introduction of yourself, and that might include who or what you love, or how you spend your time, or what you create, or how your giftings are moving you to love better, whatever you want. I would just love for people to know more about you through you.
Well, I am really humbled by your words, and it means a lot to me. And that's, it's really affirming, because that's my hope, and that's kind of what I feel is the sweet spot of what the Holy Spirit has called me to, is to, kind of be that third way of like, be challenge, like of challenge, but also invitation and accompaniment. I love that you use that word. So that was really encouraging, and thank you for saying that. So yeah, I'm Shannon Evans. I have been married for 15 years, and we have 5 kids. The oldest is adopted, which I think maybe was like our original connection.
Maybe.
Allison. Yeah. And then the 4 after that were biological. And so they're ages 11 to 2. And then we have a dog, Thunder, who's asleep over here, and will probably disrupt things soon.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah. Thunder, you're invited.
He's sound asleep. He's not interested in our motherhood conversation currently. But yeah, we live in Iowa, central Iowa. Ames, where Iowa State University is. That's usually the only way that people would know what Ames, Iowa is. But yeah, I'm kind of living this life of the past year. I've been working full time, and my husband has gone to working part time, and so then he is the primary caregiver for our kids. Although we do have like school, preschool, grandparents in the mix too. But yeah, so I'm a writer. I do social media for different platforms, and let me see. What were the questions that you actually asked? Oh, like, yeah, so I'm like, what do I answer? I think I definitely find myself and find God through writing. It feels like a calling. For me, it feels right up there with motherhood and marriage as far as, what I am stewarding as far as my time and energy. And so I take it really seriously, and I try to have always, for the past 5 or 6 years, have really tried to, just be very intentional about it. So I've been published in a lot of online and print magazines, and this is my second book, a bigger publishing distribution than the first one. So that was exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel really passionate these days about women, which I think for a long time, I didn't want to be a women's writer, because it was like, oh, that's cute. You're like in like Christian women's ministry, like how sweet, and kind of a way to, I feel like in Christian circles, it can kind of be a way to pretend to give women voice and leadership, but you're not you have to stay with the women, So I kind of like fought against that. And then just a few years ago, I kind of slowly came to understand that was just internalized junk on my part, of like this messages that like women aren't good enough. Like speaking to women is somehow less than speaking to men. Like, whoa, that was this huge aha moment when I kind of woke up to that. And I think that's part of the reason that I wanted to write this book, because I was like, I want to give women the kind of depth and the kind of nuance that we deserve. And I find like so much of our Christian literature for women is kind of on the light side, and on the not always, but it certainly can be sort of more on the palatable side, or like,
right.
And I just want to go deep and be honest, and encourage other women to be honest and kind of examine how God might be doing new things.
Yes. So, sorry, I just I love that so much, because I feel like for so long I was being pulled into women's ministry and in retreat type situations. And there was a part of me that felt really resistant to that, because, I'm not crafty. I don't want to do crafts. And it was like, wait, where's this message coming from? Because I think this is a me problem, that I think that I have to conform to that. I mean, we can get together and we can make this what it actually is, which, I love your book for this reason so much. It's going to be a great temptation, by the way, to not just open it up and read the entire thing. That makes a really bad podcast, as it turns out. You should like audio your own book. But I underlined so many things. I folded so many pages. But what you have done, and this is kind of what we're talking about a little bit with women's ministry, is that you've taken motherhood, which is so often portrayed one-sided. And you have dived headfirst into the realities of motherhood instead of the expectations of motherhood. And so similarly in women's ministry, it's like, oh, the expectation is that I'm supposed to show up and teach this craft a new way, when really, no, what are the realities as we're actually experiencing them? And so I love you for that. You've embraced complexity. You have very lovingly taken on the taboo. Can we get into the specifics of what made you write it? I know you're feeling called to serve women these days, but what are the specifics of that?
I'm trying to think of how far back to even go. I think I've been really personally and professionally disillusioned with women's ministries, and being a part of them, and feeling in a lot of ways feeling like there is still a bottom line that is controlled by men in leadership. And so like kind of realizing how, women's voices can be amplified, but they still have to conform to what the male in leadership says is okay. Mm-hmm. And this is true in Catholic and Protestant spheres, because I've been in both. So at that point, I kind of started opening up this new level of honesty before God. And at that same time period, I was doing this Ignatian spiritual exercises group, which I now love Ignatian spirituality, because it is so much about honesty and self-trust, and like recognizing how God is moving, and it's not dictated by anybody else. It's like, what God is doing if you can get honest with yourself and trust what you're hearing from God. And so that was definitely formative. So as that happened, I began to just really become passionate about women and about us being able to tell our truth, to take up that space in social circles and religious circles, and tell the truth, even if it is not like what is approved of, or if that's not what some people want to hear from women. And so it's definitely made people uncomfortable, but I sort of have always made people uncomfortable, because back when I spoke about race a lot, that made people uncomfortable. There's always something. So I'm learned to accept that. But yeah, that's kind of what propelled me. And then writing the book in particular, I think I was so interested in exploring this idea of what it is to be a woman in the church. What is like the unique spirituality that we contribute to the church, and what is the spirituality of womanhood or femininity that isn't really tapped into by us, and like on an individual level, not just a collective level. And so I just realized there's really no books about this in relation to motherhood. And for those of us who are still in the process of raising kids, that's most of our life. Like we might have jobs, we might have other, volunteer work or other obligations, but like this is a huge part of our life. So I just became really interested in how to integrate this idea of feminine spirituality with the spiritual path of motherhood, and how that can uniquely speak to women, especially just at this point in history. So
yeah, I feel like so much of what you're talking about, as far as the script we've been handed, it's so prescriptive in that you're allowed to tell a couple of different versions of this story, which is, the audience kind of comfortably expecting what to hear. So we can celebrate God's goodness. We can mourn how lost we are without him. And then we can rejoice at how perfect our lives are now that it's there. And it really can't deviate too much. And what that fails to do is celebrate our experiences as we are actually living them. So totally. Thank you so much. I would love to hear, because I feel like part of the script for motherhood is this, and you do an amazing job tackling it. So I would love to hear people. I would love people to hear you untangle selflessness and holiness. You do a lot of work in the book around motherhood and martyrdom and all of the things that we're conflating with our true identity. If you don't mind, I would love to read just a couple of sentences from your book and then kind of let you expound on that. Is that okay? Like I said, it's going to be hard to not read the whole thing, but here we go.
Well, it makes it easier for me because I'm like, what did I say? I don't know.
I know, right? You said this. You said, if we believe, however subconsciously, that our worth is earned by our self-denial, we will never believe how deeply good God says we really are. We will spend our lives becoming less and less, hoping that it earns us the approval of someone up in heaven, when the whole time God within us has been asking us to listen, to trust, and to know ourselves, because this is the interior pathway to heaven. Who does not have chills right now? That's what I want to know. Raise your hand if you do not have chills. Gosh, Shannon, what are the things keeping us from ourselves? How do we find our way back?
I think that there is a lot of messaging in Christian spaces about this sacrifice element being I mean, maybe it's not overtly said, but it certainly is implied that kind of self-sacrifice is sort of like the highest moral good, because we look
Mm.
at Jesus on the cross, and so any way
Mhm.
that we sacrifice ourselves for others
Yeah.
clearly must be good, right?
Mhm.
And the lived experience of women is that no, that actually, you know, we can tend to take that way too far and not speak our needs, not advocate for ourselves, and just
Right.
become um, at the mercy of everyone that we love. But the problem then is not only do our family members and the world not get the best of what we have to offer, but internally we become resentful and angry and bitter
Yes.
and judgmental
Yeah.
and cold and all of these things that we don't want to be.
Yeah.
Um, and so I talk a little bit in my book, but I really do think that, you know, in Christianity, it comes from a really pure-hearted place, obviously, of like, yes, it's absolutely beautiful to sacrifice yourself. Like, I never want to make it sound like I'm not honoring that, because
Mhm.
100% that's a worthwhile, beautiful thing. But again, going back to like the the people who formed, I won't even say doctrine, but Christian culture,
Mhm.
predominantly men. And so,
Mhm.
I talk a little bit in my book about a lot of times it kind of reflects the balance that men need, because naturally
Right.
throughout history and evolution, they are
Yeah.
away from the family, they are working
Yes.
independently, or they're hunting. And it becomes like, oh, they need that constant reminder to give themselves to others, to lay down their lives for others. But for women, like, most women will produce at least one child in their life. Those who don't are often the ones who are expected to care for aging parents, to care for nieces and nephews, other people's children. There's something about, and something really holy and has so much dignity, that women are natural caregivers. And I don't think that there's anything wrong about that at all. But just as since, and even from a historical perspective, right? That's what women have done. Um, but so the messaging that we need from our spiritual spaces is not necessarily the same thing. It's not
Right.
necessarily like, oh,
Right.
the more you give of yourself, the holier you are. Well, we're already giving freaking everything. Like, what else
Yeah.
can we give,
Yeah.
and still be a functioning human being? And so, there's kind of a cliche about writers that, the book you write kind of reveals what you struggle with. And I think that there is something to that theme of martyrdom and self-sacrifice running through this book, because it's been such a wrestle in my own life. And it's something that I really woke up to and realized, gosh, I don't like the self that I am. Like, I don't like that I don't even, um, you know, have time for things that I feel like I have to give the world. I don't like that half the time I'm annoyed with my kids, because maybe I shouldn't be at 24/7 with them. Maybe I need
Right.
more space. And
Right.
and that's been a really beautiful thing to see, that like when I'm working outside of the home and then come back, I personally, just me, just the way
Mhm.
I'm wired, not every
Mhm.
woman, but I
Mhm.
personally feel happier to be with my kids, more excited to
Yep.
see them. I have
Yep.
more to give them, and am more willing to receive from them. Does not mean that's true for every woman, or that it
Mhm.
should be true for every woman.
Mhm.
But I think just getting honest with ourselves and being like, well, are my needs getting met? Are there things that I feel I'm disqualified from right now?
Yeah.
Or do I feel like it's safe for my family for me to voice my boundaries or my needs, or when I would do better with another arrangement, and kind of even giving ourselves permission to think that way and explore that way. For many women, it's sort of revolutionary, because we're like, we're going to put our chin down and we're going to do this until the kids are out of the house, and then we'll live our own lives.
Yep.
But gosh, like, that's that's a long time of
It's a
not
long
being able to
time.
fully be who we are.
Yeah. I had this somewhat disturbing moment. It happened in a dentist chair. I was scheduled for a root canal and I had 4 kids, 4 and under at the time. And I I was sitting there. I'm very anxious about the dentist. And so I had my earbuds in and music was turned up loud. They kind of ushered me back very sweetly. Like the receptionist prayed with me before. I mean, they were taking such good care of me. I know, so really, really kind. And so they're ushering me back to this chair and I lay down and my music's in. There was a TV on the ceiling. Like offices had come a long way in the time that I had been gone. And it was like on the Food Network and there were these lovely women making candy or something. And so I changed the channel while the caramel set. And I took this deep breath and I thought, well, this is nice. I was having a root canal. Okay. Literally, there were two people 4 inches from my face with their fingers in my mouth, pushing my tongue around, drilling a hole into my head. And I'm like, well, this is great. And it was just this moment of reckoning for me that going to the dentist should not be my me time. You know, there are things that make me feel more like me. And for me, like you, it's writing. There's a creative process that I have to tap into. And if I don't, it feels like there's a cat clawing to get out that makes me mean, frankly.
Yes. Right. I mean, that was,
Thank you for that. But the other thing that I was thinking of while you were talking is I co-host a podcast with a friend and Taylor, who you just met, and he was talking about. I know that you've heard this idea about saying. Instead of saying I'm sorry all the time, you can just say thank you. And so instead of saying I'm sorry I was a couple minutes late, you can say thank you for your patience with me. Thank you for waiting for me. Or I'm sorry I don't understand. You can say thank you for explaining that again. And so Taylor and I were musing back and forth that he was like, I don't know, it just feels really manipulative. Like, oh, I'm sorry I'm hit you. I'm sorry. Instead of I'm sorry I hit you, like, thank you for running into my hand. Or maybe I got that backwards. But anyways, he was just saying same. Like, what's the problem here? And I'm like, that's because Taylor has a big personality and is large and in charge and delightfully obnoxious in some ways. And so I was like, Taylor, that's because this message is not for you. You need no help transforming your mindset, to quit, catering to other people, to quit bowing down so much so that you've become a doormat. So we do need to cater our messages and individualize, things as, like we've been saying, as we are actually experiencing them instead of how people think we should be or whatever.
Yes, exactly. I that's a great example of like, I mean, just because something is true for someone else doesn't mean that's what you need to hear, or that's what, your point of growth right now. And maybe at one point it was, or it will be in the future, but like,
But that's what your book has done and is doing for me is it's giving space for like all of myselves. Because the truth is, like, even now, like, as before we got started, it's like, how are you? And are you hungry? And it's like, as a 40-year-old woman, it's like, what's your testimony? Which one? How are you doing? Right? It's like, which 10 minutes are you talking about? And so I love that there is so much room to just spread out and be completely myself and feel ministered to by Rewilding Motherhood. This was particularly enlightening for me, your work around anger. There were things that you started writing really specifically about where I was like, wait, I'm mad about that too. I had never paid enough holy attention to it to give it any kind of therapy, to give it any kind of nurturing back. It's like I hadn't sat down long enough to acknowledge it for what it was. And when you were writing about it, I loved the way that you embraced every corner of your anger and you examined it. It feels brave to me because I feel afraid of anger, and I don't know, there's probably some wounding there, but I feel too I don't know. I am afraid to sit down with it for too long. I don't know exactly what I'm afraid of. This could obviously, as I'm even just talking right now on the fly, use a little attention. But I just, in your experiences, what does your anger have to do with your wholeness? You've done really important work around it. I'd love to hear you talk to people about it.
First of all, I want to say, like, I've found ever since I've really started delving into this, and again, it was my own stuff that I was working through, and like in spiritual direction and counseling. And I, now my antenna is kind of out. So anytime people talk about anger, especially like in Christian circles, then I really start listening. My antenna kind of goes up. And I've noticed, like, it is definitely not just you. There is this fear of anger, of expressing it, of feeling it, because, well, I don't know, maybe the because is different for all of us, or maybe we have a lot of different reasons, but it's certainly there to where it's like, oh, I don't really have an anger problem. Like, I don't really get angry. My priest actually this week, just jokingly, but said something like, well, I don't really get angry. I'm too holy for that, or something. And it was a joke, but it was very telling, because, well, why is anger not holy? I think anger can be very holy, but that's very it's a reinforcement of like our underlying belief about it. So what's been really fascinating to me is this idea of letting anger be neutral. Like, it's not bad. It's not necessarily good. It's neutral. But then we ask questions about it. We ask, like, we trace it back. We see, the more questions we ask, the more curious we get about it, then we can find more specific reasons that it's there, and they can tell us information about ourselves. They can give us information about what we want to be changed in our life or in society. I mean, there's plenty to be angry about in our society. But yeah, I love Austin Channing Brown. I quote her in my book, and she says, anger points us to what's wrong and what could be made right. And I think that's social justice issues, but that's also me and my family. Like, there is something wrong in, like, my trajectory of where I've gotten today, but I can make it right. Like, I don't have to stay angry. I don't have to stay resentful, all of these things, but, like, I have to know why that emotion is there. So I have to start asking questions about it. And so, to your point, like, I think following our anger, I won't say it's the way to wholeness, but I don't know that we can become whole without it, without being willing to go there.
So I'm flustered myself just then, because I can't figure out why I'm afraid of it. And I guess the idea is that I'm afraid if I start to let it go, it will get past me somehow, and I'm a yoga instructor. And so we talk about feeling our feelings all the time. Like, it's a time to carve out space and solitude to form a more friendly relationship with ourselves and get rid of this pesky voice that tells us we ought to be somebody different. Well, you know what I am right now? I'm angry, and so what if our emotions weren't, what if they weren't our masters? What if they just worked for us? What if, it doesn't have to control you. It's just an information giver, as you said. And so I wonder, it felt like a really holy exercise that I was experiencing with you as you started kind of listing, you go through in the book, listing some of the things that you were angry about. Do you mind sharing some of that without giving too much away? Some of the things that were disappointing to you.
Yeah, I was really glad that that resonated with you, because in the back of my mind, I'm like, is this going to come off like me complaining? Is this going to come off me whining about my life choices or whatever, when it's like clearly my own fault? But I went for it because I thought a lot of women would probably realize they feel the same, or have worked through it as well. So it was things like, I was mad at my 20-year-old self who picked an easy major and just sort of coasted through college, because I was like going to be a missionary. So, like, what do I need college for, or whatever, and just very, I didn't go for the things. I didn't major in writing or theater or filmmaking, like all of these things that I was actually interested in. But so I was just like, oh, let's do the thing that'll be most conducive to missions, or like spiritual bypassing or whatnot, but probably because I was afraid of the risk, or I was afraid of it not working out. So I kind of picked something, and then like getting married young within a at the time we were part of a church congregation that really like idealized stay-at-home moms. And so it was sort of like, oh, of course that's what I want to do. And just sort of jumped into that without actually really thinking through, is that what I want? Or is there some way to explore other options? Just kind of feeling like the choices that I made throughout my 20s had sort of trapped me, because now I had, pregnancies and nursing babies and young children. And I had, had been out of the workforce forever, had a degree that I didn't even want to use. And, all of these things where I just felt trapped, and having to acknowledge that I was angry about that. And like I said, some of it was just anger at myself for being like immature and not really taking things seriously. Some of it was anger at, the part of the evangelical culture that I was a part of at the time. Some of it was angry at probably my husband at some point. I'm sure I had to unpack that. But just kind of all of these points along the way. And some of it not even being angry at people, but just saying like, I'm angry that this is the place that I'm in and I feel stuck here and I don't know how to get out of it. But for me, starting to ask those questions really gave me permission to then find ways to make it work. Like, okay, this is the life I have today. So what small changes could I make that, could I have a few more hours of childcare so that I could write, or do yoga so that I feel like a whole person, and so kind of started rearranging the pieces of our family puzzle a little bit to make things actually work. And it's been really healthy.
And letting it point you to whatever unmet need you're experiencing. Yeah. You say in the book that our pain is expected to be private and brief. Our pain is in a lot of ways inconvenient. And there are certainly some gender differences that happen around anger. I was in a meeting once where I expressed some surprise over a decision that was made that I felt I should have been a part of. And when I spoke up and said so, and then someone very curtly and quickly apologized, although sincerely, it took me a minute to and it took the meeting a little longer to progress because I wasn't immediately over it. And so it was just like, I just needed to kind of process what had happened. I needed to process the albeit sincere apology. And I was called later and reprimanded because people were made uncomfortable and that the meeting took longer. And so I brought up at the time, and it felt risky and scary to do so, but that if it were a male in the meeting who had acted just as I had acted, I don't think that we would be on the phone right now. I don't think that this phone call would be happening. And so I love the permission, Rewilding Motherhood, as I read it, I felt met in every aspect of my emotional experience as I was reading it. And there was just so much permission to just lay there and feel your feelings, which is what I say in yoga all the time. So you really feel like a kindred spirit to me, just in all of the allowances that you give women. So
I didn't remember that you were a yoga instructor, but that makes sense why we click so much. Good. I'm not an instructor, but man, it's been such an important part of my life of learning to trust my body, trust myself, of learning to that I am, I love when my yoga instructors say, you are the authority of how you feel inside. Nobody else knows exactly what you need today. So my prompts are just suggestions, but you know what you need to do today.
Oh my gosh.
And man, just having that outside voice speak that, it really has gone deep into the way that I function in the world and in the church and in the workplace. And it's been really good. So thank you for being a yoga instructor, changing lives.
One of my very favorite things is and I map this out like before we start, is ignore me. It brings me so much pleasure if I'm calling out something that we're supposed to do and you're like, I'm going to stay here. You know what? I'm going to ignore you altogether and I'm going to lay down and I'm going to get in child's pose and I'm going to shut my eyes and I might even fall asleep because that's how relaxed I am. I am like, I have completely done my job. If someone is ignoring me to the point of falling asleep, like, oh my gosh. Yes. So, just one more quick thing about anger, because you brought this up too, is that there is an acceptable place for our anger. And that is usually around our children, like mama bear stories, free pass. We
totally
love a good mama bear story. What is up with that?
I don't know. I mean, it is great, but it's like,
it's not the only thing that's great.
Right. It's very interesting where it's like, I don't know. I don't know why we've decided that that's where it's okay for women to be angry if it's on behalf of our children, if it's on behalf of something else. And even in the book, I mentioned, like, even sometimes there will be a pass if it's like a social issue. Like if you're leading the charge against, then it's like, wow, look at that woman go with her maternal instinct. It's usually tied with maternal in some way. But when we're doing it on behalf of ourselves, when we're raising a voice in a way that is not pre-approved, for ourselves or for other women, it gets really dicey and people become really uncomfortable really quickly. And, Black and Latina women, this is exponentially more true. They do not have a lot of margin by society for this. But I mean, white women have not a lot either. Just there is some variation there that I always feel like responsible to point out. But yeah, it's real, and it's there's a lot of what I think that you're saying about, like, a lot of phone calls that wouldn't be happening if it was a man in the seat. And it tends to, the anger of men kind of tends to garner more respect, even if people think that they're jerks, that there's still like a level of respect and like almost kind of fear, but like in a way that gives honor, in a sense of like, oh, well, I don't want to mess with him, even though he's kind of a jerk, but like, I'm going to respect him because at least he says what he thinks. But like, if a woman does that, it would definitely not be received the same way. So
I would just love to be at a place in my life where I'm just telling the truth all the time, where I am, this is what I'm experiencing. Everyone's allowed to know it. And I wasn't, trying to conform in one way or another. That would be a lot of freedom. Okay. So Shannon, you and I live in the same type of house. Our house is also 100 years old. That seems really romantic in theory and is really, really hard in practice. Yeah. My husband, we had to learn about ourselves that we are not as handy dandy as we thought we were. And so it's been really disappointing. But how you talk about our, the domesticity that happens as women and as mothers, and frankly, as people. I mean, there's a lot of caretaking that there is to do. But it really spoke to me, and I loved how you got into the history of it all. I mean, just from the Industrial Revolution that pushed men outside the home and tied women to it so that men could go and be productive. And then even, to World War II happening, and then us being forced outside of the home in order to keep the country afloat. And even now, just a certain form of elitism, really, with the mommy wars and Pinterest and comparison and this perfect home being a sign of success. You have invited us to look at all of this so differently, in fact, that a plate might be sacred and that our labor of love might be a prayer. So I would love for you to tell people about your relationship, because it sounds really, really healthy. And I don't mean to say that it's like statically healthy, because I'm sure that you still get upset about laundry. Right. Of course. But I feel like you've just done a lot of work around it, and I'd love for people to hear it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, in some ways, this was the hardest chapter to write. I was really interested learning about some of the history that you mentioned.
Yeah, I was fascinated.
But it was Yeah, it was the most convicting chapter to write because it's the one that I struggle with the most currently. And so, but like, I know that we all need to hear it because we're all in the trenches. And so I was kind of preaching to myself as much as everybody else. But yeah, I'm slowly, thanks to a friend of mine who's a textile artist, and her work really centers the domestic realm. And I talk about her in that chapter. She's my neighbor. And so she's had a really great influence on my life, and also my friends who are in the Catholic worker movement. It's that's a sphere that really honors the domestic and honors manual labor. And so I've learned a lot from those places about how creating a space, creating a sense of place gives us an opportunity to encounter the divine, an opportunity to see the movements of God in very ordinary ways and in very ordinary life. And I think, it's not so much about like finding this sense of eagerness, like, oh, I get to fold another load of laundry. Like, isn't that a wonderful time to pray? Not like that, but like almost a whole mindset shift to see the value of care and care for the plate. Like, and I think was it Mother Teresa that I quoted about the plate? I should have known this, but she said, wash the plate because you love the person who's going to use it next. And so like this act of offering, this act of care for things as something more than just things, like, is it possible to love a plate, to love a couch that's falling apart, to love my nasty baseboards, and to serve them because it's creating a space of belonging, which in our world, it's amazing to have a place that you can come where, in my case, 7 people feel completely free to be themselves, completely loved. They feel a sense of belonging. Like, it's an honor to do that and to create that space, but it's so easy to get lost in the nitty gritty. And so for me, it's been that, that sense of seeing the bigger picture and seeing the rhythms of very boring, ordinary things as holy. And I kind of compare it to like the ritual of mass and realizing, how much repetition actually can kind of ground us in who we are in God and in God's presence. So yeah, it's a work in progress for me for sure. But my hope is that it's like a larger mindset shift rather than like starting to love individual tasks, which, let's be honest, I'm never going to love doing.
Right.
But like, if I'm washing dishes and I can remember that this is sacred work, that this is an act of love, to be put out in the world, not just like, I don't know. It's kind of a mystical thing. And when I read the saints, I really read a lot of this because so many of them were living a monastic life, were religious, who were cloistered or whatever. And it was like, that revelation of these tiny little acts, these repetitive acts, these ritualistic acts, like, have this ability to ground us in something bigger than ourselves.
It's so good. Thank you so much. Lastly, I'd like to finish with what about your motherhood is bringing you joy these days?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, I had 4 boys and I have a daughter now. My fifth one was a daughter, and we weren't like trying for a girl. Like, I hate it when people are like that. I'm like, I loved having boys. I love being a boy mom, but there is something really special. And so she's like, it's really fun. She's like in her pink phase and she's wearing her butterfly wings like everywhere, and it is bringing me so much joy to have like this other, I mean, all of my kids are really different. Their personalities are totally different, but just to kind of experience the world through the eyes of a little girl. And it brings me back to my own childhood and, just kind of the wonder of freaking out when you see the color pink. Like, I don't know, there's just something really like refreshing about going back to like those memories of my own girlhood and like how beautiful the world was, and also how comfortable I was in myself. And she's only 2, so we have a ways to go here, but like that freedom to be like so unaffected by what other people think or what's permissible, and like it's fascinating, and I think it's really healing to watch.
Absolutely. I call that my twirling girl. Yes. Like what if you could ascribe an emotion to your twirling girl? I'm picturing like recess, just or whatever, like just that sense of freedom. What's beneath the freedom? And so much of it is I'm not conscious of being observed. I'm not like looking around wondering what people are thinking about. I'm not watching you watching me. I'm just me.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
I love that so much. Okay. Well, so Shannon, tell us where to find you, where to follow you, how you want us to get Rewilding Motherhood.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Please do pick up Rewilding Motherhood. I always encourage people to use real bookstores rather than Amazon. Support booksellers locally. If you use Bookshop, the website is .org.com, then you could find it, locally, and they'll still mail it to your house or whatnot. But obviously do what's right for you. ShannonKEvans.com is my website, and on Instagram is where I'm most active. I am on Facebook and Twitter, but on Instagram I'm Shannon K, the letter K, Evans. So
I love following along. You invite us most days, if not every day, to unlearn things that have been passed down and to reclaim solitude and embrace our anger and to maintain our boundaries and to altogether make peace with our truest selves. So I'm so grateful for you. Please never quit writing, never quit speaking. I'm here behind you, like encouraging all the bravery it takes. I love you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Thanks for having me on. And I love following you too. You're one of my faves.
Awesome. Well, I have family in Iowa, so.
Hey.
I know.
Let me know whenever you come.
Yes. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, friends, is everyone already following at Junk Gypsy and at The Wander Inn on Instagram? If not, scoot on over. I'll wait. I have spent the last decade admiring the talent of Junk Gypsy. Clothes, boots, jewelry, antiques. They're a little hard to pin down, a little airless, a little mapless, throwbacks, visionaries, but definitely creative misfits. And I thought that I loved everything there was to love about Junk Gypsy, but then I went and stayed at their farmhouse, and now I am completely speechless. Almost. I wasn't completely sure when I was there I was in heaven, but then they gently tapped on the door in the morning and they brought me warm biscuits. Go, you guys. It would be so perfect for a girls' weekend. Go visit their store in Round Top. Go find their website at gypsyville.com. Follow them on Instagram at Junk Gypsy and at The Wander Inn. You won't be disappointed. Hi, Beefy.
Good morning, Beefinator.
Okay, so I saw there was like this list of questions. It was an article. It was in my Yahoo News or something, but there was a list of questions that helped you know how well you knew your beef. Like it was kind of this indicator. And I was so mad because I couldn't answer a lot of them.
Like what?
One of them was, who would your best friend let be the third person in your best friendship? And I'm like, I don't know. And then I got mad because I was like, it'd probably be somebody really dumb. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Like a Kardashian or something or whatever.
That's insulting to me.
You watch really bad TV. I don't know. The Kardashians are lovely. I don't mean it.
I do have a certain teen mom in mind that I think would get along swimmingly with both of us.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think you would approve.
No, I wouldn't. Oh, actually, I did just think of one.
Okay, me too.
Okay, let's see if it's the same person. Let's count to 3 and just say it and see if it's the same person. Okay, ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Tina
Brene
Fey.
Brown. You said Tina Fey?
I did.
Oh my gosh. I really approve. Okay. So Beef, you know that I have spent the last over a year and a half, being really, really sad at people. And there is something about getting the podcast up and going again that is so good for my soul. Like talking to people with more regularity is really, really good for me.
Yeah. I mean, we miss connection. We miss people. We miss coffee dates and long lunches. And I think that even though a lot of us have started seeing more people, I think we're like having to learn or relearn how to connect with people, even people that we used to be close with. And it can be uncomfortable to reconnect. So I think the podcast is a good reminder of of all that we've been missing out on, and that it's worth a little discomfort to get back in there.
I love that you're talking about like the discomfort of reentry, because the podcast is, I feel like we embrace that, like, okay, this is going to be awkward. That's okay too.
Yep.
But yes, I mean, community, we're hardwired for it. I mean, nobody hunts and gathers alone, and then what is it? Maslow's. Yeah. And the very tip of it is self-actualization or whatever. It's like you never self-actualize out of community. Like that's not going anywhere. In fact, the more self-actualized you are, the more you realize we actually really need each other a lot. So there are gaps, though, I will say, between like virtual community and in person, but this is really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sense of community, but it's also nice to see someone face to face that's speaking things that resonate with you. And she said so many important things.
Oh, I know. What stood out?
Well, if I'm being honest, I hate to put you on the spot in front of the people, but I'm going to put you on the spot in front of the people.
Okay.
It gave me pause when you could not find very many words at all around why you couldn't find any words around your anger. I mean, and as fierce as you are, I don't know that I knew that you were uncomfortable with it. I mean, even just like right now, when we started, you said that you've been sad at people. And I know you were kind of kidding, but what's up with that, girl?
I know. Okay. So yeah, I know I hated that too. Like, I don't like not being able to pin something down.
Right.
And like name it. And I love words, like getting good language around things feels really important to me.
At a loss.
I think it's that I've thought about it too. I think it's that anger has always been my Achilles heel, like I remember this being an issue, like even as a young person. I'm no quitter. Like I've carried this into adulthood, but like even as a young person, I remember feeling more anger than my peers. Like that just feels kind of inherent to my personality or something. I don't know.
Well, what do you remember being mad about as a kid?
I don't know. Like that culottes were in style or something. I don't know. I remember having like very intense emotions, and then I never seemed to have much control over it. And so I think that for me, anger has always felt a little scary, because you know better than anybody that I'm either like 100% or nah, I'm good. Right. Like there is no in between. And if I could just like titrate some anger, like if I could experience it and more control it, like in more manageable bouts, then I think that I would do a little better with it. I don't know.
Well, I love the way that you're 100% in when you're in. So I can work on it a little bit, maybe. One thing that I really, really loved about the interview is just her really naming her anger. But what it made me think about, when she was naming her anger, I was thinking that was actually what I would call regret. And I think that I thought of that specifically because that's like probably my biggest struggle.
Well, regret can make you angry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just that feeling in the pit of your stomach, just like the discomfort.
Bad Mexican food. Yes.
For me, like I can just think about something that I said or something that I did or something that I wish I would have said or something that I wish I would have done, right? You can go either way. You can like find something to regret every single day. And just that feeling in my stomach right now, thinking about the feeling is just the worst. And I wish I could remember who said it, because it was literally a critical, pivotal moment in my life. But someone told me that regret is one of the strongest tools of the enemy, which makes perfect sense, right? Like regret holds you back. It keeps you in yesterday. It keeps you in what already happened that you can do nothing about. And so it precludes you from moving forward, for answering a call, for doing what you're supposed to do and give next to the world.
Yeah.
And so when I was able to name it that way and identify it that way, it makes it so much easier. It gives me some power, right? Like I can make a choice to not stew on this and step over it and go be productive, which is something to do rather than just stewing on that. So, so I just, that I think about that probably, once a week when I'm stewing on something and I'm like, nope, and step over it and will not allow that regret to paralyze me.
Here's what I love about this. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm always like right with you in things. And so it's interesting to me, like regret is not something that I struggle with. Like I don't stress about things I can't change. I'm like, well, I can't change that. So I can really wipe my hands of that. And then anger is not something that you would ever like let get out ahead of you or like potentially harm someone with, or, I mean, it's so interesting to me that you have not been conditioned to fear your anger because you're in pretty good control of it. And I'm not paralyzed, by analysis of something that didn't happen or shouldn't have happened or whatever. And so I love the team that we make. I love, that you can talk me down and I can talk you up or whatever. Like, it's so great.
Community, beefy community.
Yeah. Hey, how about that to bring it right back around? Oh, I'm pretty sure Tina probably wishes she could titrate some of her anger too.
Brene definitely doesn't. She probably doesn't have regret though either.
She's perfect. Okay. Love you, beef.
Love you.
See ya.
Bye.
Love you 5 ever.
Come again?
Love you 5 ever.
What does that mean?
It's like forever, but longer.
Oh, that's good. Love you 5 ever too.
Bye.
Bye. Why'd you sing it?
I forgot about it until I looked at my notes.
And I was like, that's my favorite part.
Yeah. Safe to Save is an app that rewards safe driving. Do you find yourself wanting the peace of mind that comes with knowing where your family is, but not wanting to be that mom that's always asking, where are you? Are you there yet? How long will you be there? With Safe to Save fam, you can have the comfort of knowing that your people are safe. You can see where they are, you can see how safely they're driving, and you can even receive notifications when they have arrived safely at their destination. Equip your family today with tools and knowledge needed to make sure that everyone arrives safely while receiving sweet rewards for not teching and driving. Restaurants like Jersey Mike's, McDonald's, Schlotzsky's, Chick-fil-A, La Madeleine, Smoothie King, all of them offering free food that motivate you and your family to not tech and drive. Start with 500 free points by entering the code Allison when downloading. Download Safe to Save today. Safe, 2, save. Thank you so much for being here. See you next week. If you haven't already, please subscribe in order to not miss a thing. And if you're new around here and would like to learn more about me, you can head over to Amazon.com and pick up a copy of my book, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and follow along on Instagram at Allison M. Sully.
Today's show was a production of Allison Sullivan in conjunction with the Forte Catholic Podcast Network. For more great Catholic podcasts, head on over to fortecatholic.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.